Hi everyone. I'm doing this as a voiceover because the audio didn't pick up on this video as I was working. So this is the Lemax truck with the Christmas present load with the little puppy. And what I'm holding here is the chassis from the Kid Connection set. I've already got it prepped with two pieces of styrene to help me establish the right level for the chassis to sit in the shell. Um, and that's the grill. I took the grill off and I reamed out the headlights so they can accept an LED. And the grill was originally on the front like that. I have to drill a little hole. I already drilled holes behind the headlights to accept the wire. The wires have to come up. Unlike the other cars where you can just drill right in, these have to be uh, brought up from a little external part of the wire will show through. These LEDs are prepped with a resistor for 12 volts, and so I'm going to use a full wave bridge rectifier inside the shell with the LEDs. I use a technique where I reverse the polarity in order to stop the cars with the headlights still on. So I put a diode on the motor so the motor only goes forward. I reverse polarity to the track and the cars will go, in fact, won't go in reverse. They'll just stay illuminated. The hubs are from the actual original right there. I'm demonstrating. I pulled off the hub. The hub is from the actual Lemax car. The tire is from the Kid Connection set. The hubs that come with the Kid Connection set are soft plastic and they're very long. And so if you put the hubs on with the chassis, it's just too that you can't fit it under the shell. And unfortunately, I'm out of shot here, out of camera shot here. I was trying to do this in a hurry, and haste was making waste. So what I'm showing here is that how you shorten the axle. You just grab the axle with a plier and file it. Don't try to cut it. Just file the edge with a Dremel tool. The Dremel is not on here, but you just would file. You could do it with a hand file if you don't have a Dremel, or if you're afraid of the Dremel, which you got to be a little careful. Here I'm showing with a needle vise, just reaming out. You may have to ream out the axle just a little bit because the hub, because the axle is gnarled, and so it's a little wider than the original Lemax axle, just by a hair. So you ream it out just a little bit, um, and if you reamed it out a little too much, just use a something like Elmer's that could be undone later if you have to take the wheel off. The Lemax hubs are just perfect, but not the tires. And if one of the hubs is broken, you could use an Arden hub. Arden cars, the 1/43s, are available on eBay, and you can use them for parts. So the Arden cars are ARTIN are the best ones really. But these chassis on these Kid Connect sets and Fastlane sets are a little narrower for fitting under these Lemax shells, and I'll show in the next video how I am in fact working with the shells. Uh, that's the original hub. It's a soft plastic hub. It's good for racing and crashes, but it's just as we can't use it here. If you cut that hub off, you have hardly anything to hold onto the axle if you reduce that hub. So just unless you can work with the hub, I just save them. I save everything, even the little broken parts save because you maybe have to test a glue to see what particular glues work on those plastics. So if you save us even the broken piece of plastic, you can always test for compatibility of glues or paints. And the hardest part here was actually removing the old chassis from the shell here, the original chassis from the shell. And be careful with the puppy. The puppy breaks off very easily on that load. Um, and I use the tester with the red label that helps me glue my styrene shims inside very well. So I glue the shims in there, and then I prepare the chassis with the shim with the screw, and then once I get everything set for placement, I then glue that in as one unit. After the glue sets, I can unscrew the chassis and work with it. So that's how I do it. It's a little easier than trying to fit the chassis in and make your holes after the fact. There's a little notch there too. You have to notch out around that crown gear, and you want to be careful to. That's why I have it all set up first like this. The Lemax shells are excellent. They're lightweight. You can drill them. I think they have a lot of nice detail. They're kind of classic in their shapes. They're a little too small actually to work with Lemax figures, but they work really well in my opinion with the Plasticville, the old Plasticville buildings. And so if you have S scale or O scale or gauge stuff and you're dealing with Plasticville, the Lemax cars are great. And for the slot cars, you can pick up these slot car sets for $15 or less. You get track, you get two cars, you get the controllers. There's a lot there you can use. So again, the tires are very useful. The chassis, the axles, not the hubs in this case, but the hubs are fine if you need that, if you can work with those hubs. The hubs are fine. You just have to paint them out metallic. And I'm showing here how you can also, within that, you can actually shave down from the inside of the shell a little bit the fenders so you have a little more clearance for your tires. And again, something great about working with plastic, you don't have to pull out a Dremel and grind away on a die cast shell. Again, the tester's red label glue is great for joining styrene to whatever the plastic is of these shells. And this is the LED. It's a 3mm LED, and the plastic of the grill was a softer kind of plastic. Uh, not really soft, but it's not prone to cracking, so it's forgivable working with it. So you drill a pilot hole and then you ream it out a little bigger, and you fine tune it to get it centered. It's very hard to get it centered. You just get your hole first, and then with smaller drill bits, you kind of ream it and shape it, uh, and that has to fit through the. I'm demonstrating here. It's off camera that it has to fit through those holes that I had to make in the body, and they were later filled with latex caulking. I filled them with latex caulk, and as the caulking sort of firmed up, I could tool it with a wet finger. And then after everything was cured, dried, I then painted with acrylic paint, and I added a little bit of a luster to the acrylic paint by a little gloss varnish, a little acrylic gloss varnish over the touch-up paint from the hole. It's not that obvious. It's not. I didn't get a perfect match for the paint, but it worked out fairly well, which you'll see in the next video. So here I'm cutting the original wires off of the motor. I'm going to show you how I changed the motor. It goes very fast. If you've heard me say I remotor them, this is what I do. So you pop out the motor. These motors are not bad, but they're designed for like something like 4.5 volts. And I put in a motor that's the motor that I'll show you in the other video. It's the same motor that's used in the Lionel hand cars and in the Porter. It's also used in slot cars. So you pry the pinion off of the original motor, and a bigger screwdriver is a little more helpful than this screwdriver here, but you pry it up, and then you place that pinion on the replacement motor, and as you're pushing it on the shaft, you need to support the opposite end of the shaft. You don't want pressure on the armature, you just want pressure on the shaft. So you support the under end of the shaft with some metallic object, and then you push the pinion down. So you don't want to, again, no stress on the armature. You just want to have the strut. You want to have the other end of the axle supported. Excuse me, other end of the shaft supported as you push the pinion on. It's good to make a note when you before you take the pinion off exactly where it finished on that in relationship to the motor. Here I'm testing with a battery to make sure that after I push the pinion on, I didn't damage the motor. And then I'm showing you how the motor will just fit back. And that was the car from another video. It was the black car. That was the chassis from the black car. So it's nice to know that they run good before you go to all this trouble. Uh, so I'm cutting off the two little of the clips that hold the old motor in. Um, and I had to abandon the scissor here and go with my nipper. The nippers work better. Always wear safety glasses when you do this kind of thing. Even get your pets out of the way. These little plastic pieces, when you cut them off, they go flying. They're like projectiles. So I got up here to get my nippers. And again, I'm sorry I lost the audio on this because I was giving a lot of little pieces of information as I was going along. So you'll hot glue the motor in later, or you can wire it in. I like to hot glue and take a piece of fine wire and just secure it in, just in case there's any slippage. But I had to put my glasses on here to see a little better, my magnifiers. So it's almost a perfect fit, but it doesn't clip in. And you just have to give it a little push. Sometimes they'll seat very well. It doesn't have to seat squarely in because there's a little bit of forgiveness with the way the crown gear meshes with the pinion gear. So you don't have to get it perfectly in place. But I shave out a little piece of that. Here what I'm doing is I'm pushing the pinion in just a little more. And again, I'm supporting the other end of the shaft as I push the pinion on the motor. Sometimes you have to tap maybe a little bit the pinion. This one went on rather easily. And here I'm showing how you can shave a little piece of plastic to help that motor seat a little better in there, but it's not necessary. Especially for these, there's a lot of room inside the shells of these Lemax. These Lemax cars, I love them. Whoever designs the Lemax stuff, I love their designs. So now I'm testing, spinning the wheel and testing to make sure that everything is good. I think that's pretty much the and just scrutinize it. I'm sorry I'm out of camera range here, but just scrutinize it to see how it fits. And that's the bridge rectifier I'll be using. You can also make your own up from 4 diodes. And again, I need a bridge rectifier to maintain the polarity for the LEDs when I reverse polarity to the track. And I reverse polarity to stop the car, so the car will stay stopped with headlights on, and I put a diode on the motor so the motor will only spin in one direction. So you can't back them up. And you just do a lot of scrutinizing. Make sure everything is level in case you miss something. This is the 4th Lemax car that I've done, so I know what to look for. Again, testing. You want to make sure, sometimes you can pick up a little bit of noise from the crown, how it meshes with the pinion, and that noise can be a little annoying. I also, when I was reaming out the hub, I overshot it and came through a little bit. So later on, I filled that hole in and touched it up with metallic paint. So you can always touch up stuff. I think I'm showing the diode here. I'll be putting that diode on the motor. And again, these little LEDs are prepared with a resistor for 12 volts. I won't be running them at 12 volts. I always underpower the diodes, incandescent lights, and even diodes. I underpower them. Uh, these are very bright little diodes, and initially I didn't like LEDs, but for here, because of the plastic uh, headlight housing, I didn't want to melt. The potential issue with incandescent bulbs generating a little bit of heat. There, I showed you how I pulled the axle off there. Excuse me, the hub off the axle, showing you the end of the axle, and there were two holes there. You can sometimes adjust the, I guess they would call it the wheelbase, depending on your model. It happens to line up very well. If not, you can create your own hole or just choose the best one. Or you could elongate or reduce the length of the, the chassis. But it's hard to get glues that work with the Delrin plastic. In fact, I don't know if this is really Delrin, but I think the Carrera and the Artin cars are Delrin. Then again, I'm pointing out how I overshot when I reamed, and I have a hole there that I'll have to then fill in. So the lesson there is, if everything can be fixed. If you scrape something or overshoot, it can always be fixed. I'm sorry I lost that whole narration. I was talking up a storm about everything there. And the pickups, I sometimes add a second pair of pickups. The braid, I add extra braid, but you have to be careful if you do that. You don't have too much bulk. And when you solder braid on, your other wires can become unsoldered. And again, here I'm just double checking the clearance for the wheels, so you can thin out the fender from the inside for better wheel clearance. That's what I'm doing there. I think I'm doing one of the rear wheels maybe there. So it doesn't hurt to. You don't want to thin it out to the point where you ruin it or you make a mess. But if you were to ruin it, you could always fill in. Use a model putty, fill it in, firm it up with super glue, and then sand it and paint it. Big cavity in there, and those little areas there, you possibly could have screwed into those. Uh, but getting out the chassis, well, I think what I was saying here is use the Dremel to start to break the chassis free. Just stay away from the axles. Wear safety glasses when you're prying off. It was glued in. This, of all the ones that I worked on, this was glued in. This chassis, the original chassis, was glued in so well. Uh, Too well, actually. They have a red truck with metallic fenders. It's kind of nice. I have a lot of red, so I opted for the blue one because I wanted less red, and I like the puppy in the back. And again, the puppy breaks off very easily. Okay, now here I'm showing the uh, the finished product. See how the headlights look. And this is a slow speed. Again, you don't want to race them, so I'm using a PWM controller on them, and you can see how nicely that works with that motor. It really works well. There's the controller. I get those on eBay. They're under $5. Not eBay, excuse me, Amazon, and they're excellent. I just bought two more of them. You can't make your own controller up for that price. No soldering. They're screw terminals. Really bright headlights. If you saw there, how again at first I didn't like the bright headlights, and then I I like them. I like to see the way they reflect around the room as they're running. So it's all finished. There's a again the I think I was mentioning about the puppy. Now these are going the opposite way. I'm running them like maybe the British would run the things the opposite direction. That's because I was I'm going to have Santa. Santa hangs out the other side, so I need to have Santa sort of. I need to have Santa going clockwise around the track. And there's the other one, another one that I had done. I like this Lemax one too, the little SUV or station wagon with the skis on top. It would look better than the black track if the track were gray. There's the red car, one of my favorites. This was a real challenge. It was a very short wheelbase. I had to make additional holes in the chassis for the front wheels. I had to thin the fenders out, and I had to fall down the axles. The taxi, I love the taxi. I want the taxi for use with the Plasticville train station. And the taxi had two headlights on each side, and I just sort of drilled out just one headlight for each side, two headlights, total of two headlights. Believe it or not, these headlights even would glow brighter if it was closer to. I think that's about 7 or 9 volts on the track in PWM. Carrera made a taxi cab if you can find it, in which case you would have only to add the headlights. The challenge is to get them to go slow enough. That's why I remotor, and I'll have the Santa on here shortly, and you'll see how Santa. Uh, See how nicely Santa goes around. I wish that one of the slot car manufacturers would make a Santa. I actually um, talked to the Carrera rep on one of the forums and in a private email mentioning about if they were to do Santa in a slot car, how people for the villages would buy it. But I don't think that they realize how big the market could be. I mean, Lemax does wonderfully, and Lemax did do these cars as slot cars, battery operated. I don't know why they retired it. I suspect that perhaps they would stall and the motors would just burn out. I love that level. I love the designs. Whoever designs their cars, they just do a classic car. And I'm showing there that that was originally the black, from the prior video was the chassis of that black car from the Kid Connection set or Kid Connect set, whatever it's called. And these cars, the rear wheels, I may replace the axles. Excuse me, not the axles, the hubs. When I had to ream them out, for some reason they came a little off center, and so I tried to true up the tires to make the difference, but eventually I'll just substitute an Arton um, hubs. Now, in my big layout, I use a different system. I have vehicles built on HO diesel guts, O scale vehicles on HO diesel guts running with HO track embedded in asphalt. Uh, but those cars float. They don't actually roll. These would roll. And now I'm showing you the Santa in the little VW, and that was the Carrera chassis. So aside from modifying the chassis, it's the Carrera motor, and you can get it to go that slow on PWM. The funny thing was, when I had my own PWM uh, that I made with the pickaxe chip, I could not get the responsiveness out of the PWM, and I tried all different duty cycles and frequency levels. These little controllers, just whatever they've done, they're great. They don't have any singing, so it's a pretty high frequency, and you can see that's the correct to get that kind of slowness without stalling from a Carrera. The Carrera motor is so tiny, the permanent magnet is so small that you it's hard to get a good benefit from the PWM, uh, and that's why he's going that direction, because he's leaning out to one side. Now these LEDs are 12-volt LEDs. Um, they have no external resistor on them, and they're a diffused LED. Carrera product is a darn good product. If you could see up close on those tires, how nicely those tires are done. And you may notice in my other video, I have a version of this in a red car, Santa in a red car that I've built on the HO guts. And there's a video. I think it's called Santa's on Wheels in my main layout. I don't know what I'm pointing out here exactly. I have a little toothpick as a guide pin for the rear, just because the chassis was a little racked, and I didn't know it was racked, and I was getting some weird behavior. So I stabilized the rear end, but once I got the chassis square, uh, it was fine. And there's the PWM controller. As I said, these controllers are magical. Whatever duty cycle and frequency they're using, they are just incredibly good. You could use one for each lane of your slot car track. Now the Carrera motors were rated for like 14 volts, and the motors I use could go up to 24 volts. So I'm running them at like 7. Now you could run them, the motors I use, you don't have to do PWM with them. You can just do low voltage, but you still get your better torque and at lower speeds with PWM. And I haven't noticed any motor heating with the PWM on those motors that I use to replace. I can't speak for that Carrera motor. A long term, I did monitor it to make sure it didn't heat up. But I don't run these things continuously. I'll give them breaks. They'll stop and start. And how nice this is for a street scene. You're getting them going slowly around with your trains. You can just get such a nice look. Now, if you're using Lemax figures and the Lemax uh, amusement rides, carnival rides, you could use the 132nd cars. The 132nd cars all come with headlights. You don't have to do any modifications on them. Your only challenge is finding 132nd slot cars that are in a classic car. If you could find a 57 Chevy and 1/32nd car, even if you had to repaint it from a racing, racing paint job with all the sponsors on the cars. You could, even if you had to repaint it, it would be good. But I like, again, my love is for Plasticville, and I really want to have a car that looks next to Plasticville. And you'll notice in the other video, if you saw how I did the stopping and starting at the crossing, to do the crossing and maintaining the headlights, it's all part of these different techniques that if you want to introduce the cars, I think that it really, the cars enhance the trains and vice versa. Or you may not have room for a train. You can see how small you can get this footprint. You could use it as a table center with a little village, and instead of having a train, you could have Santa in the slot car. Which again, I think the slot car manufacturers, if they just made up a little, they don't even have to make up the slot car. They could just make the figure up, and you can put it in the slot car yourself. And that, by the way, is a very good figure. That figure originally was manufactured under Kurt Adler. That goes back to uh, like the late 1990s under Kurt Adler. These I got on eBay later, um, and under another. I think Walmart may have had them, but the molds were wonderful. That Kurt Adler mold with the Santa and the VW. If you can find them on eBay, if you can find them on flea markets and all, snatch it up for yourself, even if you have to paint them or um, clean them up. Now that one had, I got that one on eBay, and it had a cracked windshield, so I had to make my own windshield up from a piece of blister pack. And again, just demonstrating how nice that new project worked out. Santa needs a slightly lesser. Santa needs less power because the Carrera cars, those Carrera motors go really fast. That Carrera car was about $16, so that's not a lot of money for a slot car. Even at that price, it's not a lot of money. You can get the Arden cars on eBay for about $7-8. These kid connection sets, you get two cars, track, controllers, which I don't use, um, for like $14-15. eBay has something now. I don't know what the set is, but they have a set. It's a little more expensive. Walmart has these sets. So if you can find these Walmart sets, um, generic names, I don't know who's making them, but you can always cut the track into single lanes. Um, I've never cut the track yet into single lanes. The single lanes that you may see in the other video are just purchased.